Welcome to Aspen Ignites, Conversations to Build a Better World, a series from the Aspen Institute that brings together thoughtful people with diverse backgrounds and points of view. In this episode, New York Times columnist and Weave the Social Fabric Project founder, David Brooks, talked with Weave's executive director, Frederick Riley, about how the program focuses on social trust.
Social trust, in definition, is real dependability in people and others. Right now in our country, and if you look at the stats, and you write about the stats a lot, people are distrusting institutions, they are distrusting political parties, but more importantly, a growing number is people are distrusting their neighbors. And when people distrust their neighbors, we might as well hang it up because we are headed to a civil war. When trust is low in our country, our democracy fails because people don't vote. When trust is low in our country, people don't put money in banks. When trust is low, crime goes up because people don't follow rules. When trust is low in our country, all of our major health indicators go off the radar. So it's really hard to live in a place where trust is low. But what we have found throughout our country, there are these people in neighborhoods who are helping to corral their entire community on whatever issue it is, which is building trust, helping with social cohesion, and then helping to knit the fabric together in their community. You know, I tell this story about after Franklin Roosevelt became president. A week later, he was hosting these fireside chats, and one of them was on the banking system. Folks were afraid of the banking system and pulled all their money out of the banks around the country. He said, do me a favor, trust me, because that word is thrown around. Go put your money back in the bank. Your money is better in the banks than it is under your mattresses. You know what happened the next day? $10 to $20 million showed up in U.S. banks. Now, we don't have leaders who can go out and do a rally call like that anymore, but we do have these local community FDRs, people in Chicago, people in Wilkesboro, North Carolina, people in Charlotte, all over this country who can go into their neighborhood and say, this is an issue, guys. Let's build a community garden. And what we find is that the idea of folks working together on an issue helps to really move issues to the side, right? It's hard to know somebody and work hard with them and then hate them. So we find that these projects that these weavers are doing is corralling the entire community, but helping to connect a disconnected community.
Yeah, I once wrote a piece about declining trust in America. I called a bunch of social scientists and I said, give me some examples of a country that turned it around and rebuilt trust. And they were like, I can't think of any. but you were finding it on the local level. How do the weavers, the local FDRs, as you put them, how do they establish that position where people are willing to believe and trust?
If I were to come to your neighborhood and say, David, how do we get things done? And you help me to do this, now you are helping, I am dependent on you. And so you're teaching me trust at the same time, and you're brokering the trust. And what we find is, so I sometimes call these folks weavers, but I often call them trust brokers. And so when you show up for somebody in a way that nobody's ever shown up before, when you are dependable, you're brokering trust and you're showing them how to trust a world in a system, in a group of people that have never trusted before, or trust is waning. And so I think these weavers help to, they are the person in their neighborhoods that people rally to, and so people follow them along the journey.
Yeah, and are there some examples that, you mentioned Wilkes?
Yeah, let me give you an example of some work we're doing in Baltimore. So part of our work, we fund people in local communities who are these local community FDRs. And so in Baltimore, there's a guy named Shorty, who is, some folks in Baltimore might call him a troublemaker, but we've seen him bring together an entire community on conversations. He said he thought people weren't talking enough. So he goes, pulls his barbecue grill, he serves ribs, baked beans, grape soda, and puts people at tables with people they don't know with conversation prompts. And what the barbecue I went to, it looked like a We Are the World meeting, right? Folks from all over Baltimore. Folks got jobs at that meeting. Folks learned about neighborhood initiatives. Folks got answers to questions they had about city government and a ton of other things, all because they came to this particular event that he hosts all around the city. And so I've seen weavers do things like that similarly all around the country.
Yeah, you're reminding me in Baltimore, we had a weaver who we've celebrated named Sarah Heminger, who runs Thread, which is the big community organization. And Thread surrounds underperforming kids in the Baltimore schools with adults, basically extended family. And the kids are nervous about the adults because they've been betrayed so often. They don't trust adults coming in from the outside. But the rule of Thread is you can't leave. Like if a kid locks the door on you, you just keep knocking, keep knocking. And she says when somebody shows up to you after you've rejected them, it's identity changing. And it's identity changing to be the one who's been rejected. And so that is establishing, just showing up for people over and over again.
Over and over again. And the work that Sarah is doing is even important right now, because one of the stats people don't talk about a lot is the growing number of young people who don't trust the systems, they don't trust their parents, they don't trust authority, they don't trust each other. But you know who they have a grave high level of trust in? Themselves. And so if our leaders are going to take over this country one day and they only trust themselves, I'm moving to another country, because that's a recipe for disaster. And so she's teaching trust and brokering trust with her program Thread, much like a lot of these other weavers are doing around the country.
One of the things that's been a challenge for Weave is people think, oh, we're bringing the country together, or whatever. And people think, oh, there are a lot of groups that bring together Republicans and Democrats, black, white, and we're a little different.
Yeah. We're different because, and this is a deep belief in mine, because I grew up in a town that's separated by a bridge, a body of water. Blacks live on one side, whites live on the other. But the thing that has always connected us is this love for community and a love for each other. So I saw people growing up, showing up for each other, and it was against, not because you are part of a political party, but it was because we cared about a particular issue. And so a couple of months ago, we're in a place called Wilkesboro, North Carolina, that went solely for Trump in the previous election. And folks are really torn apart because of this. But we held a local Weave the People event, and we said, just sit at tables and have conversations about what connects you. We find that we all have these human things that connect us in a way that politics separates us. And once you begin to tell the story of your life, something that happened to you when you were 14, or something that happened to you when you were 5, or what's your earliest childhood memory, and we begin to share the stories, we have these connections. You and I couldn't have much different lives, but we've connected on this common humanity and this love that we have to build and make a better world. And we've become like the best friends, right? Like, we get each other in a different way. And we want other people in communities around the country to have that same inroads to relationship. Because relationships, right? Once you start in relationship with somebody, you're going to always have things you disagree on. David, I will never, ever probably agree with all your political ideologies, and you may never agree with mine. But we do have some human connections, and we go in and remind people of this common humanity that lives in every community, in every person, in every neighborhood, and that's why they should be connected, not this other stuff. We'll never, ever build a truce on that, but we will connect on humanity.
Yeah, and one of the things you've really focused on with Weave is the hyperlocal. I think of Wilkes, North Carolina, it's like an hour outside of Winston-Salem, I guess, sort of in Appalachia, North Carolina. And it was a town that really was thriving like 50 years ago. It had like NASCAR was kind of founded there. It had Holly Farms. It had Lowe's department stores founded there. And then they all left. And the town lost. It went through its opioid crisis before the rest of the country, really. But they have this fierce devotion to Wilkes. I remember one time I was down there. One of the young women said to me, we may hate each other, but if you insult one of us, we'll kick your rear end. It's not how she exactly put it, but close enough. So, but you focused on the local. Like, they may have all these differences, Trump, not Trump, but they love Wilkes. And so a lot of the effort is like people who live in the neighborhood with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we're focusing a lot of, the writing that columnists do and what people are reporting on the news is what's happening at a national space, right? We're talking about, Congress, and we're talking about the White House, and we're talking about these deep polarizing issues. But that doesn't really equate to what happens in neighborhoods around the country. Hyperlocal is where people live, where they buy groceries, where they send their kids to school, where they bury deceased relatives. We don't do that at the state level. We don't do it at the federal level. And so if we're going to knit our country back together, we have to do it at the hyperlocal level, because it is where the rubber meets the road. And it is the most important place of service that anybody in this country can have. It's to love thy neighbor.
Yeah. Now I can pull out my phone and interview, or at least contact somebody, or read somebody, watch a video from somebody all around the world. But it's your experience that people still do really value the local, the people that are physically around?
I think every neighborhood that we've traveled to with our Weave project, folks are trying to figure out how they can get closer or how they can knit it together even tighter. But this local neighborhood thing is probably some of the most important or the tightest unit of our country I've ever seen. Now, what they are coming to us are for tools and resources. They're coming to us for funding. They're coming to us to show them how to gather the people. But what I find is there might be folks in the community that aren't connected, but there are groups of people who are trying to pull everybody in. And our work at Weave is to help them in their role to pull everybody in.
Yeah, I think you've used the metaphor of the backpack.
Yep. You know, I think of our neighborhood weavers or our local weavers as climbing the side of a mountain with a group of campers behind them, and they're all carrying heavy backpacks trying to get up the side of a mountain. And I think our role is to take some of those things out of their backpacks and let them get up there faster and easier. You know, we provide funding to people who are typically off the radars of big funders. We provide tools and resources to show them how to corral their communities together and how to have really courageous conversations and share their stories of the great work that they're doing. We provide an online community for them to connect with other weavers around the country to spur inspiration. We have a speakers bureau where we train them how to go out and tell their stories because we want them to inspire a new generation of people to dig in a little deeper. So we think our role is to pull things out of the backpack so they can get up faster because our communities need it more than ever before.
Yeah, I'm going to focus on that speakers bureau because one of the founding theories of change for Weave was a culture. We need better relationships.
Yep.
But the problem with relationships is they don't scale. They take a long time.
Yep.
But norms scale. If you can shift how people think about what it's like to be a neighbor, then you can scale that.
Yeah.
But you got to provide people with examples.
With examples or inspiration. And let me also say this. I think the problems that we hear about every day are so daunting. And so if you take them, if you only watch the news, or if I only read the New York Times, or if I only read the Washington Post, you walk away saying there's nothing that I can do to solve these issues that feels like I'm drowning or we're drowning. And what we want to show them is that no, look at Danielle Battle in the Cherry Hill neighborhood in Baltimore, who just decided one day if her neighborhood was going to be fixed, it was going to be up to her. Or look at the folks in Wilkesboro who decided if my community is going to come together, it's going to be me. So folks have put together bars and all sorts of places for people to meet. And so, but we see this one person or these 10 people in every community, and we want to shine the light on them so they can inspire others to figure out that their role is to go in and be the person to stand up first and do it.
Yeah, let's talk about the hard parts. I will say I started this maybe a little naive.
Yeah.
And it didn't take long to be disabused of that. Like you go out in the community, and I would notice this pattern. We'd visit some organization or somebody for lunch, and they'd be all like, "Look at our program," and they'd be amazing programs.
Yeah.
Helping kids, whatever, deal with whatever. And then at night, when you really talk to them and had a glass of wine, all the traumas of lots of different stuff would come out.
Yeah.
And lots of animosities, lots of sense the systems are rigged against us.
Yeah.
So how have you encountered and how have you dealt with that?
I think so. When I started working with Weave, one of the things we did is we had a ton of conversations with weavers around the country because we wanted to erect something that they were going to be able to use. And they said some things really plainly to us. They said, we're going at this alone. We really need to know how to do this work in communities, how to corral people. So we went out and found research and trainings and tools to do that. And then they said, nobody funds our work. The big groups come in and they step on us and they take the money, and we don't have any, I'm paying for this out of my own pocket. So we said, we got to figure out a way to fund your work that you're doing. And we have to figure out a way to make it easy, right? Because most of the time I filled out grant applications where I filled out 25 pages of nothingness to get $25,000. So we have 2 paragraphs and a person in the community to say, yes, this is the person who is helping to weave our community together. And we fund folks in the community to go out and do the work. And so what we've done is to help to hear their rally and to hear the needs of them and go out and provide the tools and resources to help support the work they're doing.
Yeah, I was in Watts in South Central LA, and I was talking to a couple ladies who run something called Sisters of Watts.
Yes.
And they're just amateurs, like it's running out of their living room, and they help shower the homeless, they help put backpacks for the kids so they can bring home some food, they'll clean up lots, whatever needs doing, they'll do it. And they were frustrated because outside groups with foundation grants would come in for a year, 2 or 3, vanish, nothing would change, and nobody was like paying any attention to them.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, they're off the radar screen to the big foundations. Describe how the Weaver Awards are awarded.
Yeah. So I've worked in philanthropy on the other side, raising money from folks. And what the space or my experience has been is that you tell the biggest story. Sometimes it's a lie. You write a lot of words, fancy words on a document, and you get people to, and you say, I can scale this, and I can take in 5,000 kids, and I can help them with this, and I can do this, and I can do that. And it's not always true. And so what we said is that when we first launched this project, we said that the application had to be easy. You could do it in 30 minutes, and that anybody at any varying level of education should be able to craft an application. So it's 2 paragraphs about why you are weaving your community. Tell us about your work and why do you think it's building trust and connecting your community. Then 2 check boxes. That's different because typically that process takes sometimes months. And it's a huge review board of folks who don't live in the community. We hire a group of consultants from the community, local weavers, to help us read the applications and then score them based upon who is actually really doing the work. We fund 20 of them. They're micro grants. And we ask 2 questions throughout the process. What are you doing? How many people you're serving? It's all in a check-in call. We don't even ask them to send us any documents. And we go to the events just to see the work happen so we can collect stories. But none of this other red tape that they go through. So it's a really easy, simple process. Yeah. And it really serves to highlight the people who are really working to do the work on the ground in communities.
Yeah. And one of the magnetic things about it that I found was just the people, their motivations were in the right space.
Oh,
so.
Yeah. Not to cut you off, but I think one of the highlight for me is how excited they are to get this micro grant. You give this award and we host this big event afterwards, a reception to announce who they are. We invite the media there, they're taking pictures, and these folks are in tears. They're crying, they're hugging me. And I'm like, I just gave you $5,000. It's not a big deal. But nobody has ever shined the light on them in the work that they do, this work that they're passionate about, this community work that they are driven to, that they wake up every day doing. We shine a light on them and then step out of the way. And I always say, this is not about me, this is about you. So I'm going to take the back seat and let you shine on this.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You're in a neighborhood and there's a bunch of empty lots. And most people just walk past them and think, well, that's a city's problem or whatever it is.
No,
and some people are like, I'm going to assume responsibility. This is...
Erica Gonzalez and Miss Gloria in Baltimore had a vacant lot that they would call the police on people because they were selling drugs or doing drugs in this vacant lot. And so with some support from Weaver Awards and some other funding, they bought the lot. They put a stage out there. So they host community meetings. They bring people together. And now because of the spark that we helped with the Weaver Awards, they're now applying for government grants to help revitalize the entire neighborhood that they live in, block by block by block. With these tiny projects are going to help raise the housing prices for the folks who live there and own there, but also help the young people have a better place to live and things to look at in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Now, you grew up in the kind of neighborhood that a lot of these weavers serve, but would you say nonetheless that working at Weave has changed some of your perspective?
Yeah. So I think what it has helped me to do is to double down on the way that I grew up. Grew up in the projects in Saginaw, Michigan. I grew up with some pretty rough conditions. I didn't meet my dad till I was 11. But I always had these people in my life who showed up for me. My childhood pastor, who was the first person to tell me I was important and that I could be somebody. My elementary 5th grade teacher, Miss Sharon Smith, who told me I was smart and I needed to go to the city school for the gifted. And so she paid the fees and drove me to take the test and waited in the parking lot for me. And she told me I had to go. If they accepted me, I had to go because I was going to a different place in life. Or my high school English teacher, Miss Sharon Floyd, who recently passed away, who would send me care packages when I was in college and put a $75 or $50 check inside because she knew for me college was a necessary step and not a rite of passage for other people. And so although I grew up in a rough community that had a lot of issues, I think I learned how to weave, watching my mother and her sisters pull resources together, but also an entire community that rallied to propel me here. And so I think I've devoted my career, the previous time that I worked for the Y, and this stint of my career that I'm working with the Weave Project, to support the people who are doing the community weaving, because it is the conveyor belt that helped to push me here.
Yeah. There's a saying that what goes right in a life is more important than what goes wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes it only takes one person to believe in a kid. Yeah. And if there's that one person.
Yeah. And I've been lucky. I've had quite a few, but those are just part of the 3 that stand out, who've really pushed me here. So.
Okay. Well, Fred, we took over an organization that was run by a guy who didn't know how to run an organization. You made it professional. I used to see when you first started running the meetings, I was like, wow, Fred gives the team like clear direction, gives positive feedback. It's like, wow, is this what you're supposed to do? So I personally am grateful that you're now the executive director of Weave. And hopefully all the weavers in the country are going to be more and more grateful.
Well, let me say this, and I always we joke about this on the Weave team, where we say David Brooks is the Beyonce of weaving, right? Because people get excited when Beyonce walks in the room. If you ever walk through the airport with you, people get excited, right? I've seen cheers and jeers in the airport, right? But what I will say is that for you in the role that you sit in life, the place of privilege, the places where you get to go, but for you to think about people in communities and not just write about the work, but to really say we need to do something about all these things that are happening, is something that not a lot of people sign up to do. So I'm always appreciative for that, but also really appreciative of you taking the giving me the nod and say, I want this person to come lead Weave, and you are the person to lead us into this next set of directions. And so I'll always be in your debt for that.
Best decision I ever made. Thank you, Fred.